The first Jurassic became sort of history. This extraordinary puppet technology of Stan Winston's and the CGI of Industrial Light and Magic reached a kind of critical mass. What surprised me, and probably pretty much everyone who worked on the film, was just how swept away one would be by the experience of watching it.
The fascinating thing about why I think these movies have worked so effectively is that they still utilize all the tools of special effects. It's not as though the movies now are only made with computer effects. Stan Winston Studios and the people who work there on behalf of Jurassic Park have brought a tremendous amount to the believability of these characters.
It starts on the drawing, it starts in sketches, color renderings, maquette, sculpture, new ideas are birthed as we develop.
You start thinking of them as being other personalities on the set. I worked with the T-Rex before, of course, so we know each other very well. I know some of these raptors too, although they've had a bit of a facelift. I don't really think of them as puppets at all. I think of them as being sentient beings somehow. And I guess they are. They take at least 12 people to work each of these creatures, and so they are a combination of the intelligence of those people that are working them.
Action! When you're figuring out how it's going to be done, these different methods come about. For example, walking legs with the raptor, which I actually wear and fit inside. Or this should be a total hydraulic puppet.
As with any character that we do, their performance is based on the puppeteers. The performance is the guys who are the puppeteers who are doing it.
The way the Spinosaurus and the raptor were controlled were telemetry devices, which is a machine that you can twist and turn it and makes the head twist and turn or move the body around.
Try not to let it become mechanical. It should be,
And you have separate people on arm telemetry devices. On the Spinosaur, they're actually strapped into it so that they move it around, and what they do is translated to the dinosaur.
Our director, Joe Johnston, decided that he wanted to have an airplane crash. And one of the interesting things that you'll see is you will see the principal actors in the airplane. Rather than stay very wide and do something CG or try to do something with doubles, we had to design a tree that really was a gimbal that we could put the airplane into and be able to move it around, tilt it, shake it.
The plane crash and the aftermath of the crash, the destruction of the airplane, was probably the longest sequence to shoot.
We had 3 separate types of planes, at least 2 of each. We had one that would sit in the tree and rock back and forth and complete the crash. We had one that would roll. We had one that would crush from the outside. One that would crush from the inside. So through the combination of editing this all together, it looks like one plane.
I think all action-adventure movies today are enormously difficult because the audience expects a tremendous amount now. And in order to deliver that, you're asking people to really push the bar continually on what it is you're trying to do.
Falls Lake was the toughest part of the whole thing, I think, because it had to be at night in the rain, and it involved not only the dinosaur, but fire and smoke and all that stuff.
they've got the Spinosaur diving into the lake. I mean, come on. I mean, he acts in the water. And I must tell you that some of the most dramatic real-life images I have ever seen are of the Spinosaur in the water. This animal is alive, and he's in the water going after people underwater.
When you work with the animatronics, it's terrifying. On the other side, there's some hysterical footage of us running through fields away from, well, nothing.
In almost every movie, sooner or later, you just have to pretend. We had to run away from imaginary dinosaurs, and we had to see imaginary dinosaurs, and you just make it up.
Joe will say, listen, take a tail, take a tail. And you're like, take a tail, whoa, you know, going like this and pretending to see a tail.
It's been amazing to watch these computer guys, men and women, setting up the shots so that they can put the dinosaurs in later. They put little lights out there, which are reference points, and then they shoot this big silver ball, which has something to do with shadows and things like that. And they explained the whole thing to me, and I nodded my head as if I had understood, but I don't have a clue how they do it.
Basically, everything's new. We've got a bunch of new creatures in the way of the pteranodons, the Spinosaurus, the ankylosauruses, and we're doing new fun things with them.
In this film, more than any of the other ones, we had a chance to have our computer-generated dinosaurs interact with Stan Winston's animatronic dinosaurs. In the other films, we'd cut from ours to a cutaway of his. In this one, they can actually make physical contact.
We have Stan's T-Rex lunging forward, and when you see the computer-generated Spinosaurus come from behind and actually bite into its neck. And I don't think anybody's going to be able to tell whose is whose, you know, whether it's a CG or an animatronic. I'm sitting here, but what you don't realize is there's 200 people behind me that's working on this movie, and it's an amazing crew.
The process of putting computer-generated dinosaurs on the screen starts with the tactile art of sculpture. That's actually where the design phase of the dinosaur takes place. Once those sculptures and maquettes are done, we get them here at ILM. We scan those sculptures. From the scanned data, we can go into the computer and rebuild them to match the sculptures. Once the geometry or the outer surface is created, we have to introduce all the animation controls into that geometry, into that outer surface, so the animators can get in there and manipulate it and can move it, can animate it.
The technical directors take the animation from the animators and then they start lighting it, trying to replicate the scene that the DP and the director set up in front of you with the plate.
What we did early on in this production was to produce believable skin and muscle. Muscle under the skin, the jiggle of the skin. Well, we wanted it to be a process that was dynamic. In other words, if a leg slammed down, we wanted to see stuff jiggle the way it would and have it happen from dynamic forces that they can generate within the computer.
And then the compositors who have to take all those elements and make them look like those computer-generated images belong in the real live action plate. So it's a huge process, but it requires amazing talents.
Ready and action!
We entered a new era with Jurassic Park 3 in that we can focus more on the artistry of effects and animation. The tools are known now. Now all the focus and energy goes more into the craft of making these images. And I believe with Jurassic Park 3, you're going to see performance beyond what you've seen in the other movies.
You put this kind of effects team together, the team from ILM and the team from Stan Winston Studio, and you have sort of an unbeatable mix that there's no reason why this shouldn't look and feel beyond anything we've seen in the previous movies.
This is definitely a step beyond what they did in Lost World. And Lost World was a big step from Jurassic Park. It seems like there's nothing now that you can't create on screen.
Certainly in Jurassic Park 3, I feel the tremendous responsibility and pressure to at least come up to the expectations of an audience that have been delivered 2 films with amazing soundtracks. That being done by my friend and mentor, Gary Rydstrom. Basically how it breaks down is I'll read the script and I'll get a sense of what they're trying to do with the film. Then I meet typically with the director, in this case Joe Johnston, and I got together and we spent the entire day just sort of throwing out ideas, trying to get a sense of where Joe wanted to go. Obviously in Jurassic Park 3, the overwhelming amount of the sound design is dinosaur vocals. I can't tell you how many nights I've laid awake in bed thinking, okay, this is the 3rd Jurassic Park film. How am I going to come up with these vocals that will be fresh and new to the audience and convey the menace and terror of the Spinosaurus, the communicating abilities of the raptor, or the majestic quality of the pteranodon? When I started this film, I was very fortunate in that I had begun working with a couple of folks that are world-famous field recordists for scientists and nature documentaries and things of that nature, Kathy Turco and Doug Quinn. I knew that they had recorded many different types of animals around the world that I had, in some cases, never even heard of, and that's how I approached Jurassic Park 3, to collect as much new and exotic sounds as possible. In the previous ones, there was a lot of zoo recordings. In the case of what Doug and Kathy were able to bring to the table for me, many of these sounds were really created out in the wild. For instance, vulture recordings in Madagascar, that's not something you're going to find in a zoo. Or in the case of Kathy, climbing up on rock cliffs and recording all sorts of Arctic seabirds. There were certainly some recorded at zoos, and specifically to Jurassic Park 3, I got in contact with a fellow by the name of Ron Whitfield. He's a well-known big cat breeder, and he has a retired cat's home in the middle of nowhere. We were able to go to his site and record these big lions and tigers, some of which weighed in excess of 300 pounds, which played as a very strong element in the Spinosaurus, for instance. In the case of the Spinosaurus, I would use the low guttural quality of both a lion and an alligator, and I used the sound of a baby bear crying. And then I lengthened a big bird cry that had a raspy quality. It's almost like, you sandwich these together and then you start playing with them back and forth and figuring out how the components go together. The raptors have always played a key part in Jurassic films. And in Jurassic Park 3, the story is actually wrapped around the evolution that they've experienced since the inception of Jurassic 1. The raptors have become smarter, if you will, and therefore they've developed forms of communication.
He's calling for help. Come on!
And our characters are pursued by these very intelligent raptors that are communicating over long distances with one another, so that it really puts our actors at a disadvantage. Therefore, it put me in a creative position to really convey this communication. I did that by using these vulture recordings that had these wonderful little staccato sounds. And it's wonderful because when the raptor opens his mouth, you can sort of sense that this whole vocal cord is doing this sort of vibrato type of call. And at the same time, then I bring in the classic hisses that are a signature quality of the raptor. The great thing about this scene is that for a sound guy, for all of us who love this concept of surround sound, these creatures are surrounding the characters, and I can start to use the room so that we really feel as an audience that we're being surrounded, and the sound helps create this sort of tension within the scene. So then the instrument then plays a key role. Alan Grant blows through the skull and makes this sort of long, drawn-out cry that is based upon the same sounds that I use for communication. What I was able to do was I took the raptor cries and I gave the sound a resonant quality. And ironically enough, to me, it sounds like sort of somebody blowing through a kazoo, but it still has that signature quality that we recognize for the raptor communication. I've been waiting to do a pteranodon for years. I started playing around with all sorts of different types of bird sound. One is an albatross, and another is a giant petrel. And then I used this little creature that makes this long barking sort of shrill call. Not a bird, but nonetheless sounded very bird-like. So I started playing with the petrel and the albatross recordings and this little creature from Africa, and started blending different versions together and really created this sort of prehistoric cry that you definitely recognize as a bird, but you feel as though it's a big bird and a bird with power. I took a vacation with my family 3 years ago to Hawaii, and I had brought my recorder, and at one point I looked out of the kitchen and I looked in the backyard and I saw all these mongoose fighting one another to get these little scraps of cantaloupe or guava or whatever it was. So I stuck my mics out there and just left the tape recorder rolling, and I started playing with it for the babies, and it worked out perfectly because it has this sort of, it has a baby-like quality, yet it has this sort of ferocious, scattering quality. So that was the key component for the baby pteranodons. It really worked out well.
With the pteranodons, Chris would be handling all the vocalizations. You know, he's getting all those big sounds from going out and recording animals or whatever he's doing. And then we're doing more sync specific, which are the wing flaps.
I work with the Foley artists. They'll come up with the sounds, and I'll do my best to interpret what they want from it. I'll use my various devices to improve the sound that she's creating to make it believable to the shot that we see on the screen. The thing about Foley, you've got a Foley artist performing live to the screen. So if the bird takes a big flap and then small fluttery flaps, they can in real time recreate those sounds. So it's really faster and more efficient for a human to watch it on the screen and go ahead and recreate that sound.
We'll create all the footsteps for all the characters that move in a film. That's what we're going to do here, is we're going to create some of the dinosaur footsteps, some of the baby pteranodon footsteps. If the people are swimming, we'll swim for them. We'll do some of those sound effects.
When we're done recording, we hand those sounds off to a Foley editor who takes all our sounds and cuts them to be perfectly in sync with the picture. Then those sounds are handed off to somebody like Chris Boyes to create what's called the final mix and what's heard, what the audience hears in the theater and then, of course, at home.
This film is definitely going to be driven by two things, sonically. It's going to be driven by music, and it's going to be driven by dinosaur vocals. So the two really have to work in concert with one another.
I had the very good fortune of being recommended by John Williams to score this movie. Mr. Williams was unavailable to score Jurassic Park 3 because he was scoring AI for Steven Spielberg, who was also producing this movie, so I think he understood that his unavailability was in very good earnest. He was looking for someone who could carry on the tradition from his standpoint. I'm very honored to have picked up that torch, and I hope that I carried it to his satisfaction.
Ready and action!
Essentially, I saw the picture as they were starting to piece it together. I think that the main question starting out was where John Williams' themes were to be used, and there were basically three major moments where everyone agreed that it would be very necessary to bring back the Jurassic Park themes. Two of them involved panoramic shots of the island and dinosaurs, and the third was the ending.
there was a new major dinosaur. We all agreed that that dinosaur needed new music. Actually, there's a major sequence in which that dinosaur has a fight with the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It's clearly an homage to King Kong when King Kong fights the Tyrannosaurus Rex. In approaching that scene, I was juxtaposing John Williams' music for the Tyrannosaurus Rex with my music for the Spinosaurus. For the Spinosaurus, I brought in extra tubas and trombones, so there's a very big low end in the brass contingent. And we had 2 sets of timpani drums, which is quite a, one set of timpani drums is quite a sound in itself, but 2 of them really is very overwhelming.
We're not leaving this island without our son.
Then you can go and look for him.
Also, there are new characters. The Bill Macy, Taya Leone characters, they're making a big personal sacrifice in this movie for their son.
Listen to me. We'll find him.
And I felt there was a pretty strong need for some thematic material that covered the unity of the 3 of them. Taya Leone and Bill Macy had been split up, and this ordeal brings them back together with their son. So it's kind of a reunification theme. As the audience becomes more and more attuned to what's going on in the movies, I think that the function of music becomes more and more clear. And I think the audience are starting to expect the score to function in a way that, brings them into the movie.
I think given that audiences are now becoming very accustomed to the tremendous visual effects and things of that nature in film, they're at the same time becoming very used to these wonderfully rich soundtracks. And so the expectations just continue to climb for us in the sound field, and we sort of all collectively feel as though we help tell the story with sound.
I actually worked for a short while on Jurassic Park 1, about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. So I was on that project for about 2 months, so got quite a bit of information on dinosaurs and all that at that point. And I've always been really interested in dinosaurs and have gone down to the Field Museum in Los Angeles at the La Brea Tar Pits and all that stuff. So that it's sort of in my bones, I guess, no pun intended. Drawings, a lot of designs that need to be generated, so I basically have a couple of art directors. Greg Papoli is my supervising art director, and he's going to be staying here in Los Angeles and dealing with all the big stage sets that we're in the process of building and also will be building. And then Doug Meerdink is my other art director, and he will be handling all the stuff that we're going to be doing in Hawaii. And then I have set designers who do the actual working drawings, I guess you'd call them blueprints, because the construction crew has to have drawings to work from. Also, we have a concept illustrator, Jack Johnson, who's worked on a lot of these movies. and he's doing actually some of the images that are behind me. He's done concept paintings.
Usually I get on a show the same time the production designer does, or within days. And I get involved in his areas that he think are really going to need to be developed first. And sometimes that's out of his head, sometimes it's strictly from a passage in the script or an outline. The first thing that we tackled on this, for instance, was the cage that was going to handle the pteranodons. This was a new thing for the show, and it had to be huge because they, for instance, have a 32-foot wingspan. So I started fooling around with shapes, but in this case, because we have a director who is a former illustrator, art director, designer, he has some pretty strong opinions about the visual elements. So he would do a thumbnail of a shape, and then I would take off and try and develop that shape and make some construction sense out of it.
We also have several storyboard artists who are working directly with Joe Johnston, the director, to storyboard all the scenes in the movie.
Generally, Joe will do a drawing plus talk us through what it is he sees the shots being. Then we will draw the storyboards in that sequence to tell the story almost as a comic book kind of thing, frame by frame. We sort of draw these in relation to exactly how they're going to shoot it, and so everybody sort of gets the idea of what the director has in mind and the scope and the scale and the technical tricks he might want to use and or effects in it as well.
Right now I'm doing a scene, it's the opening of the movie kind of. They're going to the island with a boat and they're going to take off on this parasail and they're going to get lost in the island. So I have the script page and I follow the description and I'm trying to figure out how they're going to shoot and the best way to tell the story through pictures. Then I'll show this stuff, all the storyboards to Joe Johnston, and we're going to go through the boards and analyze shot by shot and figure out if that's the best way to tell the story. And he might decide to add a shot or two or just sometimes just completely change the whole thing, you know? So it's just a way to show him, you know, what we're thinking and our input into the movie.
It's gonna be okay, bud.
Especially with a film like this because it's so technically complicated. It's very important to try to storyboard as much as you can in advance. Otherwise, it doesn't allow for as much spontaneity when you're actually shooting because we're dealing with some really large Stan Winston creatures as well as how those pieces are going to segue into what ILM's going to do. And so the more pre-planning we can do, the less it's going to cost us when we're actually shooting the film and the more efficient we'll be. Here at Universal Studios, we're going to be doing interior as well as exterior stage space, so we'll be using several of the sound stages here. Stage 12 will be our major jungle set, and its variations. There'll be trees coming in, moving out, things changing. Stage 18 is going to be our preliminary process stage for our airplane interior and also other blue screen work that we have to do. And then we'll have a couple of other stages. Stage 29, there's a whole sequence where they're down in this canyon where the pteranodons live and they have to walk across the big suspension bridge. We'll be doing that there probably. And stage 27, which is the big deep pit stage here at Universal, we'll be doing the exterior canyon wall and all that, so we can get like a 50-foot high canyon wall so they can have them working their way down the side of the canyon. As well as probably the pteranodon egg nests where the kid gets dropped and all the little baby pteranodons are trying to eat this kid. And then we'll also be on the back lot. We'll be using Falls Lake for part of the River Canyon. And then we also are going to be using part of the set from Jurassic Park 2 at the end of the sequence when they're on the island, they escape and they go to this one office, its whole compound. Rather than like rebuild it from scratch, we decided to try to use some of that structure and then we're going to add our own structure on top of that. Same colors, those colors, so let's try maybe a black and maybe like a blue. Maybe.
The irony with Ed Verreau is that Ed goes back to Raiders of the Lost Ark with us as well because he was a storyboard artist at the same time that Joe Johnston was working up at ILM and effects. So it's really nice to bring those two together now in the capacity that they're working with Joe directing and with Ed Verreau as the production designer. And the work that Ed did with the jungle sets is quite phenomenal because by starting a movie like this on location where everything you're doing is backing into the stage work so that jungles shot outside now are being shot inside big sound stages and they need to match with what you shot in Hawaii, that's enormously difficult to do. And I think he did an incredible job. And we also put together a set out on the back lot of Universal Studios, which ended up with a massive amount of scaffolding just to construct the hillside around the water. And he did quite an incredible job, again, of matching the locations that we found in Hawaii. And that speaks again to the importance of the pre-production work and the communication going on early on, where you have to know what those locations are early on in order to know exactly what it is you're matching. But he did phenomenal work.
Ready and action!
Time, the ever-flowing river. Come with us now to a time before man, when the river flowed through a newborn world and giants walked the earth. Welcome to Jurassic Park. The ultrasaurs in this lagoon are the largest creatures ever to live on the Earth. Ahead in Stegosaurus Springs, our journey continues. Heavy armor plating protects these great beasts from savage predators of the period. Next up on our tour is Hadrosaur Cove. Unlike the vicious carnivores of the compact
Station 6 to dispatch.
here in Hadrosaur,
Intrusion. Unauthorized entry. Intrusion. Unauthorized entry.
This concludes your tranquil journey through the world of the dinosaurs. Please join us again soon on your next visit to Universal Studios Hollywood.